a medley of Arise My Love, Anima Amin, and Dodili.
Rise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. For lo, the winter's past, and the rain is gone. The flowers appear on earth, the time of singing is come. The voice of the turtle is heard. Victory bringeth forth her green figs, and the vines in blossom bring forth their fragrance. Arise, arise, my love, my fair one, come away. Arise, my
실루엣을 세를 보니까 아이스크림 얼마나 알았어. 이거 뒤에 맞죠? this is the coming second one. That's amazing. I'm gonna be constantly confused. It's gonna be fantastic. That's really confusing. The video is only 20 seconds away. So I look over the video and I see myself coming to his book and I'm like, what? Like a magic trick.
And the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions. And the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today, we must build for tomorrow. Give us
As I grew up, I came to learn that life was not a game, that heroes were just people that we called another name.
And you're all gonna. There you go.
Shall see visions
Well, you might become a rabbi someday.
to the sky.
You know what that means?
We must live for today. We must build for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Now I'm grown, the years have passed. I've come to understand the choices to be made, and my life's at my command. I cannot have a future till I embrace my past. I promise to pursue the challenge. Time is going fast, and the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today. We must build for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us love. Today's the day we take our stand.
Good evening, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom and Good Yontif. I'm Jeff Pinsky, and on behalf of the Jewish Community Council of Erie, welcome to Temple Anshe Hesed's and Congregation Bris Shalom's combined Shabbat and Shoah Remembrance service from the beautiful Temple Anshe Hesed. For the past year, the JCC's annual events have been locked in a pandemic pause, but this year we're trying to carry on our local traditions, yet still under the CDC guidelines. As such, we thank Rabbis Morey and Goodman for leading this meaningful service for our two congregations, as well as Presidents Janice and Doris for their support. This service is so important to us because for the past several years, the JCC's focus has been almost solely on the Holocaust awareness. We sent thousands of public and parochial school students to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and we brought in Holocaust survivors and scholars to address you and the general community. Next Wednesday on Yom HaShoah, for example, we're joining other Jewish organizations for an online presentation via Zoom by Dr. Michael Berenbaum, a very distinguished Holocaust scholar, professor, rabbi, author, and filmmaker who's going to speak on the topic, Not Your Father's Anti-Semitism. Members of both congregations should have received the Zoom information and the link by now, but if not, your offices will provide it via email. However, you must register, which is free. Now, it's fitting we're here today on Passover, our celebration of freedom, to honor those who have had their freedom and their very lives viciously stolen from them and in the most brutal and barbaric manner. As such, it's particularly moving that our congregations representing two of the most popular branches of American Judaism join here together in prayer and remembrance of those 6 million, a quarter of them children. You see, when Europe's Jews were being marched into the gas chambers, Hitler and the Nazis did not ask if they were conservative or reform. They only wanted to slaughter Jews, no matter what their affiliation was. Because of that, while we here tonight, we may practice our faith and our rituals and our traditions in not exactly the same ways, but we nonetheless are one people with one destiny. That's why tonight we've come together, not as separate congregations or Jews, but as one people who together will always proclaim, never again. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Jeff. Thank you.
And Rabbi Goodman, it's wonderful to have you with us. And we'll begin as we invite our upcoming two bat mitzvah students, Lauren and Rachel, forward to light our Shabbat candles on page 2.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat.
As these
Shabbat candles give
light
to all who behold them, so may we, in our lives, we give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
As we turn together to page 10, we thank God for the opportunity that we have to be together. And it is so amazing that we have a group of people that are here at Temple and so many people joining us from around the area and from across North America on our live stream. And wonderful that we can create this sacred space together as we come and celebrate Shabbat and the end of Pesach, and also commemorate all those who perished in the Shoah. And how wonderful that we would begin having our future light our Shabbat candles, and so a wonderful symbol. So thank you. And we're looking forward to celebrating with both of you really soon. Good. Why don't we join together? Hinei Matov, how beautiful, how wonderful it is for us to be together. Page 10.
Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad.
And on page 20, we'll continue as we welcome Shabbat with Lecha Dodi. And I know Jesse's excited because we have people here to sing with her, so we all have
so
to
excited.
sing.
Lecha dodi, likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat, nekabela. Lecha dodi, likrat kala, p'nei Shabbat, nekabela. Shamor v'zachor.
likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat, nekabela, likrat Shabbat, lechu v'nelcha, ki makor haberacha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof maaseh b'machshava tefila, lecha dodi, likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat, nekavela, lecha dodi, likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat, nekavela, boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala, gam b'simcha u'b'tzola, toch emunei am segula, boi kala, lecha dodi, likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat, nekabela, lecha dodi, likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat, nekabela.
So when you meet another Jewish person on the street, you might say hello, or you could say,
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom is good. Or you could say,
Shalom Aleichem.
and the response would be, Alechem Shalom. On page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mohem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzedchem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
On the following page, on page 26, we join in Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadav, Yitkadav Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach irute, be'amlich malchute. Lecha yechon u'v'yom echon, u'chayedecho beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, u'bizman kariv. Vimeru, amen. Yeshmei Rabbah mevorach, le'am olam me'amaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Vitbar, Vitramam, V'yidnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitale, V'yitalal, Shemedi Kudesha,
Urichu.
Leila, Min Kol Berchata, V'shirata,
Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran be'alma.
V'meru.
Amen. Page 28, we rise for Baruch.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. On page 30, we join in Ma'ariv Aravim. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Bidvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, B'chochma Poteach Sha'arim, Uvitvuna Meshane Itim, Umachalif et Hazmanim, Umesader et HaKochavim, B'mishmerotehem Barakia Kirtzono, Borei Yom V'Layla, Golel Or Mipnei Choshech, V'Choshech Mipnei Or, Uma'avir Yom Umevi Layla, Umavdil ben Yom uven Laila, Adonai Tzvaot Shemo. El Chai v'Kayam, Tamid Yimloch Aleinu Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai, HaMa'ariv Aravim. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. You can be seated.
Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu lemadata Al Kain Adonai Eloheinu b'shochbeinu Uvkumeinu nasiach bechukecha V'nizmach b'divrei Toratecha Uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Ki hem chayenu Ve'orech yameinu Uvahem negei yomam v'layla Negei yomam v'layla Ve'ahavadcha al tasir Mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev amo Yisrael.
And we turn together to page 34, and we'll invite Josie and Rachel up to the bima to lead us in Shema and V'ahavta.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu,
בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך ובביתך ובלכתך בדרך וקשרת ובקומך וקשרת להיות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים אליכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Adonai Elohechem, Amen.
Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot, o sefele, Nora tehilot, o sefele, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, malchutecha ra'u banecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe, ze'elianu ve'amru, ze'elianu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh,
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai,
mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh.
Nora tehilot, o sefele, Nora tehilot, o sefele, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed.
Page 43. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will.
Baruch atah, atah Adonai, haborei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. ועל ירושלים ועל כל עמו, ועל ירושלים ועל כל עמו, ועל ירושלים שלום. Baruch atah, atah Adonai, haborei sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael.
We are a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happened once upon a time happens all the time.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. בני ובן בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. In a moment, but not quite yet, the incredible cantorial soloist you have here, Jesse, is going to lead you in to the Amidah, the central kind of peak of our worship, the also known by the rabbis as Hatfilah, the prayer. So I just wanted to give us a little meditation to take us into this important moment and also wrap it into this important day that we are commemorating of Yom HaShoah that is coming up on our calendar. So one of the things that happens at this time of year is because Shabbat coincides with Passover, in the traditional liturgy you add an extra prayer to the Amidah. And the words of that traditional prayer start, Ya'aleh v'yagvo v'yagia v'yar'eh. And they're really interesting. They're really unique, and there's almost nothing else like them in the rest of our liturgy, because they're all aspirational. They're all verbs in the future tense. V'ya'aleh, Ya'aleh means to raise up. Yavo, may it be, it should come. V'yagia, it should arrive. V'yar'eh, and we should see. These are these hopes and dreams that we have. So on a day like this, it reminds me that the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust who were Jews, and the many more who perished who were non-Jews during the Holocaust, were all individuals who had hopes and dreams and aspirations. They were Ya'aleh v'yavo v'yagia v'yar'eh. They looked forward to something that never came to be. And one of the things that we do as Jews who live on in their memory is we fulfill the promise that they desired to have but never arrived at. I want to add to that the strange coincidence that the English word and the Hebrew word for the Holocaust are different, right? Jews know the Holocaust by the Hebrew word shoah, which is really catastrophe or disaster. And in English, we use the word Holocaust. And Holocaust is a word that's related to a sacrifice that is burned on an altar, right? And in our tradition, the idea that we use with the concept of sacrifices that are burned on the altar is that they rise up, that they go up. So may it be that our prayers on this night, which include the special prayers for Passover, the prayers that you hold in your heart, the prayers that you add with the tefillah, with the Amidah, may it go up and fulfill the wishes and the dreams of those who are not here with us today to say those prayers themselves. With that, I turn it to Cantor Thorpe for the Cantor Soloist Thorpe for the beginning of the Amidah.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi tehillatcha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El Hagadol Hagibor Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chazdei Avot V'imahot, U'mevig Ula Livnei B'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Be'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh HaKot HaRa V'Hoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayeh HaKol B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Gevurot, Umidom Elach, Melech Memid U'Mechayeh, U'Matzmiach Yeshua, B'ne'eman atah lehachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh, shimcha kadosh, kadoshim b'chol yom yahalu chasela. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Please be seated.
May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Continue on page 57. Ever-present one, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer, wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands. You are our God. whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. And page 59. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth, which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha lecha na'eh lehodot. Page 61. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate amongst the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praise are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamvarech et amo Yisrael ba shalom.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech Adon Lecho HaShalom. Ki atahu melech Adon Lecho HaShalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov einecha levarech et Amecha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam.
We take now a moment of silent prayer for you, between you and the universe. Either take this opportunity to inculcate and share the thoughts that I had at the beginning of our Amidah, or maybe considering we've just finished a week, Shabbat is that day of rest before we go into the next week, reflect back on your last week and think, what did you take from it that you want to bring forward into the world, that you want to raise up, and what do you want to bring into this next week?
we take a few moments and think of all those who are struggling so bravely with COVID-19, those who are infected, their caregivers, their families, all those who are suffering. And we think of them and all those in our lives who suffer and are in need of our blessings of healing, our energies of healing that we can send out into the world on their behalf. And we hope and we pray that they recover and they heal speedily. And we think about Greg Bennett and Michael Byron, Andrea Kempner-Blake, Richard Sharon, Ruth Bostoff Coleman, Sandra French, Judith Goldman, Scott Gordon, Patricia Heibel, Michelle Wolf, Rebecca Gottlieb, Deborah Susan, Zachary Jackson, Fred Kern, Carol Love, Dane Marcinowski, Stephanie, Luke, Trey, Abigail, and Charles Nobles, Cheryl Perry, Debbie Perry, Bob Bush, Josh Whitmer's house, Darlene Sharp, Peg Plowski, Fran Porras, David Renberg, Will Rosenthal, Carl Siam, Martha Snyder, Steve Toddleben, Timothy Tillman, Lorraine Wellington, Gary Williamson, and Matea Press.
To those names, we add the thoughts and prayers for a speedy healing of body, soul, and mind to all the members of our community, Breathe Shalom, whose names we will read tomorrow during the Torah service on Saturday.
So we'll turn together to page 253 and join together in our prayer for healing.
May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Oh, we can do better than that. Shabbat Shalom. Yes. Fabulous. When Rabbi Goodman and I were discussing how to frame this evening and how to talk about it, and combining both a celebration of freedom and the end of Pesach with also the beginning of our observance of Yom HaShoah, we thought that while it is too easy to talk about famous people, of the Anne Franks and the Elie Wiesels and the people whose stories we read. And so we thought we would do something more personal and share our own stories, our own family stories of people who have bravely gone through the Shoah and their experiences. And so we'll share a little bit with that, of those stories with you. Rabbi?
The most important part of this sermon for me is probably taking out my watch and making sure that I keep an eye on the time, because as Rabbi Moraes and I were talking before, we could tell these stories as a whole, like, very long class, which I'm sure all of you didn't sign up for tonight. When I was a kid and my mom and dad would drop me off at my grandparents' house, we'd wake up in the morning, probably an hour before my grandmother really wanted us to, and ask for breakfast and, run around and get into trouble. And, at some point we would ask some questions like little kids do, about my grandmother and why does she have a funny accent and where did she come from? And, who are her parents, and did she have brothers and sisters? And my grandmother would start to answer some of those questions. She would tell us about her village in Poland. She would tell us a little bit about where she went to school and a little bit more. And then she would get to the subject of her parents or her brothers and sisters, and she would start to cry, and she would sob. And my sister and I learned, and our cousins, pretty quickly that there were things that you asked my grandmother about, and there were things that you shouldn't ask my grandmother about, because it hurt her too much, and we obviously loved her and didn't want to do that. And I went, when I was young, to my mom, and I said, why does Grandma cry so much when we ask her about her family? And she said, well, she survived the Holocaust, and her family didn't. And I would say, what else can you tell me? And she would say, not much, because she won't tell me the story either. My mother one time went to a bat mitzvah in Toronto at the age of 15, and the cousins in Toronto were telling her about her mother, saying, and her story of surviving the Holocaust. And my mother, when she was 15, said, what do you mean my mother survived the Holocaust? And they said, what do you mean your mother hasn't told you that she's a Holocaust survivor? What does she tell you? And my mother would say about my grandmother, when she asked about what happened to her family, they all got sick and they died. And that was the end of the conversation, because it was way too painful for my grandmother. When I was 16 years old, one of my teachers in high school assigned me the assignment, the class was 20th century world history, interview a person who experienced a significant historical event before the year 1945. I said to my mom, do you think I could interview Grandma about the Holocaust? And she said, I don't know, but you can try. So I asked my grandmother, and she said yes. And we sat down with a tape recorder, and over 3 hours, she told me from beginning to end, for the first time ever, anyone in the family, and also, as it would happen, the last time ever, the entire story from beginning to end, which I'll share the basics of with you tonight. My grandmother was born in the town of Raków, Poland in 1927. Not as she would say, not the big Raków that's near Warsaw, the little Raków near Częstochowa. And it's a really hard town to find on a map unless you have all the other towns around it. And she grew up on a kind of a normal experience growing up in Poland in the 1920s and 30s, in which she experienced a lot of anti-Semitism from the Polish villagers, and lived a fairly simple, poor life of a furniture crafter's daughter. She had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and she was the middle child right in the middle. In 1940, when the Germans invaded Poland, there was no immediate change, as my grandmother said, to her situation. But after a little bit of time, it became really evident that they were going to need to hide. And so at some point between 1942 and 1943, the entire Jewish population of the village, which was 50% of the people, maybe 200 folks, fled into the forest and hid from whoever might be coming to get them, which they assumed would be the Nazis and the SS, who at that time were moving through Europe and either deporting people to concentration camps or, in the early days of the Holocaust, as many of you probably know, exterminating Jews on site with what they called Einsatzgruppen. My grandmother and her family survived for at least 6 months. The dates are sketchy because she was only 12 or 13 at the time. In the forest, eating whatever they could forage for, and once a day going to a nearby farmhouse where a kindly Polish farmer would give my family 1 loaf of bread for the 6 of them to split, 7 of them. So one day my grandmother was arguing to her parents, why did she always have to go with Fagel, the youngest daughter, to get the bread? Why wouldn't Gela, the more spoiled other daughter, go with her? And the parents said, fine, take Gela. And my grandmother and Gela walked several miles to the farmhouse, and when they came back, nobody was there. My grandmother went to the village to ask someone what had happened. And an old man who they trusted and they knew in the village, who was Polish, said, you don't want to know. You need to run from here as fast as you can and never look back. And my grandmother and her sister said, no, we want to know what happened. What happened? And so he took them to a spot in the forest where a pit had been dug for the entire Jewish population of Rakov. And the Polish population had come during the day and lined them all up and shot them to death. My grandmother and her sister are the only surviving Jews of the town of Rakov. The other piece to this story that's interesting from a historical perspective is the fact that until the mid-1990s, that version of a story was never ever told by Holocaust historians of any kind. If my mother went to a convention and said, the Poles exterminated the village, the historians would tell my mother, no, that's not correct, that didn't happen. And only in the mid-90s did historians start to come out with learning stories that either the Germans encouraged the Poles to exterminate their local populations, or the Poles, perhaps in this situation, chose to do it on their own. My grandmother and her sister got fake papers from a person who worked at City Hall, and she got the fake name of Jovana Floretskaya, and her sister fled, leaving Poland because they knew in Poland they would not be safe, for they might be discovered as Jews. They went to Germany, where in Germany they posed as Polish farm girls and asked to be assigned as slave labor to a German-captured farm. My grandmother and sister were both assigned to farms in Belgium, where they worked several miles apart from each other, until the Allies liberated Europe and Belgium in November of 1944. The final piece of this story that I'll tell, although of course there's a lot more to say, is this. My grandmother had been hiding for many, many years, several years now, and had learned that she had to hide her identity at all times and in every possible situation. And after the Americans liberated Belgium, she was standing in a Red Cross line for food one day, and an American soldier was walking up and down the line and asking everybody if they knew if there were any Jews around. Well, after 4 years of hiding, this was a terrifying request, and my grandmother slowly slipped out of the line and ran as fast as she could. The soldier chased my 16-year-old grandmother down and said, "Why are you running? Are you a Jew?" And she was petrified. And he pulled out a Jewish star and said, "I'm a Jew too. Our unit has a rabbi, and the rabbi is looking for survivors to reunite them with family and to help them out." And that rabbi's name was Rabbi Polyakov. He's a rabbi in Baltimore who only passed away a few years ago. And he helped get my grandmother first to Canada and then to the United States. And that's my family's story of survival a little bit. I just want to leave you this one last thing. I couldn't resist an audiovisual image. This is my grandmother with her great-granddaughter, Etta. Etta, her middle name is Fagel. Fagel is her sister who passed away, who we named her for. So I'll hold it up to the camera so that you guys can see. I thought it would be like my camera on my computer where the little thing is right here and I could just hold it up right here. But, the thing that I raise up, my grandmother is 93 years old. She's still alive and kicking in Burbank, California, and we can't wait to go and see her, hopefully a little bit later this year when the kids get vaccinated. So our family lives on, and the inspiring part of the story, of course, for the Holocaust, for most of us, is the story of persistence, of survival, and looking forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rabbi Moraes for his family story.
My family story begins in two different places, one in Rome and the other in Berlin. My grandfather was from Rome, and his name was Armando, and he went to the university there. He graduated and went to work for the family business in England. When the war broke out, the British government said, look, you're Italian, we're at war, no thank you, time to go. And he sends a telegram to his parents saying, I gotta leave, what do I do? They say, we have an idea, go see your cousin Victor in Shanghai. Don't come back here, there's a war. Go. Being a young man, he listens to mom and dad, probably the first time in his life ever, and he gets on a boat and he goes to Shanghai, where he works for the Sassoon family, part of our family, and he lives in one of the nice hotels, and he is part of this very affluent Western European community living in Shanghai and enjoying all of these lovely benefits. My grandmother's family was from Berlin. Her father was a decorated officer in the First World War in the German army, and he was also in business, and his thought was he was a loyal German, and they weren't going to touch him. And they in fact arrested him during the Kristallnacht. And then about a year and a half or so later, he finally decided it was time to go. Amazing that it took so long. It took so long, we think, because of the realities that the Holocaust and all of these issues and laws and restrictions and persecutions didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened with a backdrop of 2,000 years of European anti-Semitism. And so this was seen as another wave. Oh, we'll get through this, it'll be okay, it'll pass. And when he realized that it wouldn't pass, there were no options. He couldn't get on a boat to the United States or Canada or anywhere else. One of the only places in the world that you could go without any papers was Shanghai. Shanghai was an open city. Nobody was watching the gate. It was open. It was an international city. And so through planes, through the Trans-Siberian Railway and then a boat and whatever, they finally get their way to Shanghai. They bribed their way out of Germany. Actually, he bribed his way using collectible postage stamps. He was a stamp collector, and he had that as to fall back on, and he sort of bribed his way, getting the right papers to get out of the country and get his family to Shanghai. And my grandmother at this point was an 18-year-old, beautiful, beautiful teenager, and she got a job working in a fancy hotel in Shanghai. As in the movies when you saw the cute girls with the tray in front of them that said the candies and cigarettes and whatever, that's what she did. So she was selling this stuff, and one day along comes this dashing little Italian Jewish boy, and they hit it off. And they got married, and they had my mother. And my mother was born, and sorry, Mom, I'm outing you, but my mom was born in 1943, and about 2 months after she was born, so she was born in August, and in October, the Japanese took over Shanghai and imprisoned all of the enemy aliens. So anybody who was at war with Japan with a passport was sent to a Japanese version of a concentration camp, and there they spent the next 2 years. And they were liberated by the Americans eventually. What is common in the two stories is what happens when they came back, or what happens when the war ended. When the war ended, they had to pick up their lives. They had to figure out what they were going to do. they had to rebuild. And amongst the survivors, there was a little bit of an unspoken code. So my grandmother had a fairly sarcastic sense of humor, and so she would say things like, you know, when I was getting ready and I was excited to go to camp in the summer, she would say things like, well, your camp was probably better than mine. And amongst the survivors, there was this experience of inside almost jokes that helped them relate and come to terms with their new lives. And it was hard to share. It was hard. I remember in the same experience having an assignment in middle school to interview somebody who had lived through a historic experience, and interviewing my grandmother, and she was actually pretty good about sharing the stories, but for the first time my grandfather shared his story. And they are these treasures of an insight into people. An insight into people, and their ability to withstand and survive was astounding, is astounding. And what I find incredibly powerful was their willingness to start again. Their willingness to pick up everything they ever knew and leave it and start something new. And they looked at the world differently than we do. Nothing ever bothered my grandfather. Oh, so he didn't have much money, it's fine, it's whatever. Oh, this happened, it's okay, it doesn't matter. I think when you've survived the worst that humanity can throw at you, the normal challenges of life, it doesn't mean much. And I think if we can learn from them, learn from their willingness to persist and their resiliency and their abilities to always look for what could be next. And I think that we learn so much as we commemorate all those. And, you know, our name for this experience, Yom HaShoah, is actually only half of the official name. The other half of the name it's Yom HaShoah Ugvura. And it was chosen by the Israeli government very, very carefully to say that it was not only to just remember those who perished, but also those who struggled and who resisted and who fought. And it was the date of Yom HaShoah was also chosen very carefully. It's coinciding with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And that was a really important statement that the early Israeli government wanted to make, and I think holds today, because it is not only about those who perished, it is about all those who continue to have the effects of that. And we all continue to have the effects of racism, of hatred, of bigotry, and our way to fight against them and to resist. And on Wednesday, we'll have the opportunity with Dr. Berenbaum to think about how this experience of hatred continues, even today. And so we'll learn more on Wednesday. So with that, we'll turn together to page 282 as we rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol, l'teit gedola le'otzeh b'reishit, shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu porim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוצר הארץ ומושב יקרו בשמיים עמה ושכינת עוזו
ושכינתו זו בקווי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו ופזורתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, בארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
We'd like to invite our two temple presidents forward, and maybe you'll stand over here at Jesse's podium. Please come. As we call to mind those who have died most recently, Joan Harf, and condolences continued for Walter and your family. And we recall the yahrzeits for this week: Scott Landy Randall, Mitchell Burdick, Elaine Cohen Castleman, Reba Bush Mercury, Benjamin Spector, Jacob Hayes Bissinger, Janet Lyons Levy, Seymour Rudolph, Ted Sherman, Anna Radov, Solomon Loeb, Lizzie May, Pearl Gluck, Nathan Sillin, Marion Sales, Sam Cohn, Joseph J., Martin Luther King, Sophia Hanauer, Saul Schnauerman, Clementine Loeb, Esther Cooperman, Ruth Levick, Nathan Semmel, Yetta Aaron, Fred Hess, and Doris Semmel-Tisch. And if you have other names that you would like to add, please add them into our chat box on our YouTube page, as we have Kaddish, a special Kaddish led by our two temple presidents. I'll share that text with you.
V'yitkadal,
Auschwitz,
v'yitkadash,
Lodz,
shemei rabbah,
Honar,
v'yomad divrach hiltei,
Babi Yar,
v'yomlich malchutei,
Maidanek,
v'hayekon u'yomechon,
Birkenau,
uv'hayetakol beit Yisrael,
Kovno,
v'agola u'zminzman v'kariv,
Yanovska,
v'imru, amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Olam Armaya.
Yitbarav v'yistabah,
their signs Rat,
v'yitparar v'yitloman,
Buchenwald,
v'yitnaseh v'yithardar,
Treblinka,
v'yitaleh v'yitalal,
Vilna,
shemeda kudasho b'richu,
Bergen-Belsen,
le'ala,
Mothasen,
mimkal b'rata v'shirata,
Dachau,
tushbachata v'nechemata,
Minsk,
daminran v'yalma,
Warsaw,
v'imeru, amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shamaya V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru. Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru. Amen. Please be seated. We have just a few announcements. First of all, we'd like to invite everybody to join us for our Zoom Oneg. It would be lovely to connect with you all here. It's posted at the very top of the chat box. I hope you'll join us for that. Shabbat morning, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock is our Yizkor service via Zoom. We'll connect on Zoom, and then Torah study to follow at 11. Sunday, we have no Gesher in honor of the end of Pesach. And then on Wednesday, we have our special community-wide Yom HaShoah program with Michael Berenbaum. So I hope you'll join us for that. You do have to register. Registering is easy. Put in your information. You get an email with the link. And then on Wednesday at 7, click the link, and we will join in our program. And so we'll conclude this evening with Oseh Shalom, our prayer for peace. Let's join together.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you all for joining us, whether you're joined us on YouTube or here in person. Thank you, Rabbi Goodman, for joining together. Lovely to lead services again with you. Wonderful. And we wish you all a Chag Sameach. And what am I forgetting? Walter. Walter. We are going to celebrate with Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, v'ahava uvratzon hinhilanu, zikaron lema'aseh bereshit, ki hu yom techilah, Navikro and Kodesh, Zecher v'tziat Mitzrayim, Ki banu v'harta, v'yotanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'yava uvratzon, Hin haltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mikadesh HaShabbat. Amen. L'chaim.
Shabbat Shalom. Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Rabbi.
Now, was that unit in Refuge? Was it an area guy?
You doing okay?
I'm a little hard to. Joe's been gone.
Is he gonna fill Goodness scraps.
But for the last 2 years, she hasn't been with me. She hasn't been able to. So